My hand was shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. Not from fear. From the effort of keeping my voice level while I recorded. Through the crack in the door, I watched my mother kneel down in front of my niece, straighten the collar of the only clean shirt the girl owned, and whisper something so soft I had to lean in to catch it. "Don't tell your uncle what we talked about. This stays between us." The door slammed shut an inch from my face. I didn't flinch. I just pressed stop on the recording, slid the phone into my pocket and smiled. The kind of smile you wear when you've just found the first thread of something you're going to pull until the whole thing unravels. My name is Daniel Reyes. I'm 41 years old. And for the last 14 years I've built a logistics consulting firm from a card table in my garage into a company that now clears $3.2 million a year in revenue. I did it the hard way, 18-hour days, 2 bank loans I personally guaranteed, and a marriage that survived only because my wife, Elena, believed in the math before the math believed in itself. I'm telling you all this not to brag, but because you need to understand what I had to lose the day I decided to burn my relationship with my parents to the ground. My younger brother, Marcus, died in a car accident 3 years ago. His daughter, Sophie, was 5 at the time. Custody went to my parents, Richard and Carol Reyes, because Sophie's mother had left when Sophie was 2 and nobody had heard from her since. I trusted my parents with my niece the way you trust gravity. It never occurred to me to check. I also happened to be the trustee of a $410,000 life insurance policy Marcus had left behind. Money that was supposed to go towards Sophie's care, her school, her future. My parents had access to a monthly disbursement of $2,800 for her expenses. That number matters. Remember it. It started on a Tuesday in October, the kind of gray afternoon where nothing feels urgent until suddenly everything is. I stopped by my parents' house unannounced to drop off a birthday gift for Sophie. She was turning 8 that week. I let myself in through the side door, the way I'd done since I was a teenager, and I heard laughter from the kitchen. Wine glasses clinking. My mother's voice, bright and performative, the voice she used for company. "Oh, she's fine in there," my mother said. "Kids don't need much. A room, some crackers, and a TV. Honestly, Linda, the checks alone practically cover our cruise fund this year." I stood frozen in the hallway. Through the doorway to the den, I could see Sophie sitting alone on a bare mattress on the floor. No bed frame, no proper sheets. Wearing a shirt with a stain on the collar, watching a cracked tablet with the sound turned all the way down so it wouldn't disturb the dinner party 20 feet away. Nobody had told me there was a dinner party. Nobody had told me a lot of things, apparently. I didn't say a word. I walked back out the side door, sat in my car in the driveway, and I made a decision that would take me the next 4 months to carry out. I started quietly. I requested a full accounting of the trust disbursements, which was my legal right as trustee. It took 3 weeks of polite paper trail emails to get my parents to comply. When the statements finally came, I sat at my kitchen table with Elena and went through every line. The math didn't work. $2,800 a month every month for 3 years, that was over $100,000, and there was almost nothing to show for it. No new clothes charged to any account I recognized. No school supply purchases. A single $45 charge at a pediatric dentist 18 months ago, and nothing since. "Maybe they're saving it for her," Elena said, though I could hear she didn't believe it either. I brought the statements to my parents' house and laid them on the table, calm, almost casual. "Just trying to understand the gaps," I said. "For the trust records." My father barely glanced at the papers. "Daniel, you don't understand overhead. Raising a child has indirect costs. Utilities, wear and tear on the house, our time. We're not going to itemize every grocery run for you like we're on trial." It was a good lie. Jargon heavy, wrapped in offense, designed to make me feel petty for asking. I nodded slowly. "That makes sense," I said. "Sorry to bother you." I did not believe a single word. That week I drove to Sophie's elementary school under the pretense of dropping off a permission slip. I asked the front office, casually, when Sophie's last dental checkup or vision screening had been logged. The secretary, a kind woman named Mrs. Okafor, pulled the file and frowned. "Actually, we've been trying to reach a guardian for months," she said. Sophie's missed 4 wellness screenings. And her teachers flagged that she comes to school in the same 2 outfits, rotating. We sent letters. I felt something cold settle into my chest. My parents had never mentioned any letters. 2 nights later, I came by early to pick Sophie up for what I told my parents was uncle time. Really? I wanted an excuse to look around the house properly. I arrived 10 minutes before I said I would and stood by the cracked door I mentioned at the top of this story. That's when I heard my mother's whispered warning to Sophie, "Don't tell your uncle what we talked about." But before that, I'd heard something worse. Through the kitchen window, my father on the phone with his brother. "Danny's sniffing around the money again," he said, laughing. "Let him. He's soft. Always has been. He'll write us a strongly worded email and go back to his spreadsheets. That boy's never had the stomach for a real fight." I stood in the cold, and I let that sentence do something useful to me. It didn't hurt. It clarified. I went back one more time, statements in hand, and asked directly, "Where's the money going, Dad?" Not overhead. The actual number. My father's jaw tightened, but he recovered fast. He always did. "Fine. You want specifics?" We hired a part-time caregiver through an agency for supplemental support hours. It's a licensed arrangement, completely above board. You'd need a subpoena to see those records. And frankly, I resent the implication. Another good lie. This one almost worked. Until I actually called the 2 licensed childcare agencies in our county the next morning. Neither had any record of a contract under my parents' name ever. There was no caregiver. There had never been a caregiver. The $100,000 wasn't overhead. And it wasn't a caregiver. It was the cruise fund. The new car in the driveway I'd assumed was leased. The remodeled kitchen. My niece had been left alone, unwashed uniforms and missed doctor visits, while my parents spent her father's death benefit on themselves and called it parenting. I made a decision that night at my kitchen table with Elena across from me. If I come at them straight, they'll lawyer up, hide the money, and drag this out for 2 years while Sophie stays in that house, I said. I need them to think I've backed off. I need them to think I'm exactly what Dad said I was. Soft. So I performed. Over the next 6 weeks, I let my shoulders slump a little more each visit. I started speaking slower, apologizing more, letting my father interrupt me without pushing back. I brought up family therapy once tearfully, and let my mother pat my hand and tell me I was being sensitive. I stopped bringing paperwork. I let my voice crack, just slightly, when I said I just wanted us to be a family again. I even left my old, defeated flip phone on the counter during visits instead of my real one, so they'd see me as a man who'd stopped tracking anything. Inside, I was doing the opposite of stopping. I was documenting everything. But my father needed to believe he'd won. Confident men make careless mistakes. I needed my father careless. I set 3 things in motion. First, I quietly petitioned the court, through my attorney, a sharp, unshowy woman named Priya Chandrasekharan, for an emergency welfare review, using Mrs. Okafor's school records and the missing screening letters as the foundation. Courts move slowly, so I needed the case to build itself before the hearing date. Second, I asked my parents, with performed sadness, if I could take Sophie for a special uncle weekend, to reconnect since things have been tense. They agreed instantly. An unsupervised weekend meant an unsupervised weekend for them too. I used it to take Sophie to a pediatrician for a full evaluation. Results forwarded directly and confidentially to Priya. Third, and this was the bait, I told my father offhand that Elena and I were finally selling our house and probably rolling the profit into a trust review, just to simplify things before year-end. It was a lie. But it was engineered to make my father anxious enough to talk about the money out loud, to someone soon, because guilty men who think a spotlight is coming will always try to get their story straight with an ally first. I planted a small recorder, disguised in a phone charging brick, in the outlet of my parents' kitchen during a visit where I forgot to take it home. Then I waited. 3 days later, my actual phone buzzed under the dinner table at my own house. An alert from the recorder's companion app. I excused myself to the bathroom and listened, live, my pulse loud in my ears, as my parents' voices came through tinny and unaware. If Daniel asks again, we say the money's in a locked education account, my mother said. He'll never check that. He won't, my father agreed. He's too busy playing nice. Kids finally learned his place. I sat on the edge of my bathtub and smiled the second smile of this story. The first one had been an ending. This one was a beginning. My parents insisted on hosting Sophie's 8th birthday party. To show everyone she's thriving, my mother said. Which told me exactly what kind of performance they were planning. Extended family, neighbors, my aunt and uncle, 20-some guests in the backyard with a rented bounce house and a store-bought cake with Sophie's name spelled slightly wrong. Sophie sat at the edge of the party in a new dress, bought, I'd learn later, specifically for that day and returned to the store the following week, while my mother told a cluster of guests how exhausting but rewarding raising her had been. My father, 2 drinks in, got expansive. Some kids just need less than people think, he said, loud enough for the yard to hear, laughing. Sophie's low maintenance. Aren't you, sweetheart? Sophie didn't look up from her plate. That was my cue. I stood and I didn't raise my voice. I've learned that a quiet voice makes a yard go silent faster than a loud one ever could. Sophie's low maintenance, I said. Because for 3 years nobody's maintained her at all. I set my phone on the table and played 11 seconds of the recording. The locked education account, he'll never check that, he's finally learned his place, into a backyard that had gone completely still. There is no education account, I said, calm, each sentence landing like a period at the end of a long paragraph. There's a life insurance trust with $410,000 in it, meant for this child. Over the last 3 years, $100,800 has been withdrawn for her care. I have the bank records. I have 4 Miss Wellness screenings from her school. I have the pediatrician's report from 2 weeks ago documenting malnutrition markers and untreated dental decay. And I have a recording made in that kitchen of the 2 of you discussing how to lie to me about all of it. My mother's wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the patio stone. Nobody moved to clean it up. It stayed there broken for the rest of the story I'm about to tell you. A small, ugly monument in the middle of the party. You can't just, my father started. I already did, I said. Detective Marsh is here. So is my attorney. And so is Child Protective Services. I gestured and 3 people who'd been quietly standing near the side gate for the last 10 minutes stepped forward. I'd arranged, through Priya, for them to arrive exactly at the moment the party would be at its most crowded. The moment my parents had the most to lose in front of the most people. I picked up the folder I'd brought, copies of everything, the bank statements, the school letters, the pediatrician's report, and I tore it once cleanly down the middle and set the 2 halves on the table in front of my father. That's what your version of the story is worth now, I said. The real copies are already with the court. Then I walked over to Sophie, crouched down to her level and said, quiet enough that it was just for her. You're coming home with me tonight, kiddo. For good, if I have anything to say about it. Here's what happened in the 90 days that followed, in the order the consequences landed. Richard and Carol Reyes were served with an emergency custody removal order 4 days after the party. The judge, reviewing the school records, the pediatrician's report, and the recorded conversation submitted as evidence, granted temporary emergency custody to me and Elena within the week. The county opened a financial exploitation investigation into the trust. Forensic accountants traced $97,400 of the $100,800 in disbursements directly to a kitchen remodel, a Caribbean cruise, and payments on a leased SUV. None of it spent on Sophie. My parents were charged with felony misappropriation of a minor's trust funds and neglect of a dependent. My mother took a plea deal. 5 years probation, mandatory restitution, and a permanent bar from any future guardianship or fiduciary role. My father fought it, lost, and was sentenced to 14 months, with the judge noting in the sentencing statement that the recorded conversation showed a chilling, deliberate consciousness of wrongdoing. Socially, the fallout was just as total. My aunt and uncle, who'd been at the party, stopped speaking to my parents within the month. My aunt later told me she couldn't unhear my father's voice on that recording. The extended family group chat, once 30 people deep, quietly dissolved. My parents' names came up in conversation less and less, the way a name does when everyone silently agreed not to say it. I want to be clear about one thing though, this wasn't a story about scorching everyone in my path. Mrs. Okafor, the school secretary who'd flagged the miss screenings, got a handwritten thank you note and, when the district cut her department's after-school program funding that spring, an anonymous $5,000 donation from me to keep it running. My aunt, who'd known nothing and grieved hardest when the truth came out, I brought back into Sophie's life slowly, carefully, because Sophie needed more people who loved her, not fewer. Justice wasn't about punishing everyone adjacent to the wound. It was about protecting the one person who'd had no voice in any of it. It was raining the night my father showed up at my door, 7 weeks after his release. I almost didn't recognize him, thinner, his jacket soaked through, no umbrella, no car in the driveway because his license had lapsed with everything else. "Daniel," he said, and his voice had none of the confidence from that backyard anymore. "I have nowhere else to go. I'm your father." I stood in the doorway, the warm light of the house behind me, Sophie's laughter drifting in from the kitchen where Elena was helping her with a puzzle. I thought about the mattress on the floor. The stained shirt. He'll never check that. He's finally learned his place. "You taught me exactly what family means when you thought no one was checking," I said. "I believed you. I'm still not checking anymore. Good night, Dad." I closed the door. Gently. No slam this time, I didn't need one. Elena met me in the hallway and didn't ask who it was. She already knew. She just took my hand, and we stood there for a second in the quiet of a house that finally, truly, belonged only to the people who deserved to be in it. "We did the right thing," she said. "I know," I said. And for the first time in 4 months, I actually believed it all the way down. Here's what I learned. The people who count on you being too soft to check the receipts are usually the ones with the most to hide. Love isn't loud and neither is justice. Both of them, done right, are patient, quiet, and absolutely relentless. If someone in your life has ever underestimated how far you'd go to protect someone who couldn't protect themselves, you already know exactly how this story felt to write. Have you ever had to play weak to expose someone who thought they had you fooled? Tell me in the comments, I read every one. And if this story hit home, hit like, subscribe for more. And share it with someone who needs to hear that quiet people finish these fights too.